Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today's True Crime Tuesday and we're going to be talking about a super interesting case. Mary Bell was born in 1957 to a 16-year-old prostitute named Betty, and Betty did not want to have a kid, it seems like, because when the doctors showed Betty her baby, she said, "Get that thing away from me." While Mary was growing up, Betty would often leave town for weeks at a time for business trips. And these were in Glasgow, which was about 170 miles away from where they lived in North Tyneside, England. Betty also attempted to give Mary up for adoption kind of under the radar, which is crazy, but Betty's sister, so Mary's aunt, actually rescued Mary, recovered her from the situation, and took her back to Betty. Mary was also very accident prone. She accidentally fell out of a window once and overdosed on sleeping pills. And of course, it's speculated that Betty actually caused all of this to happen. So as you can see, Mary really suffered from a lack of attention from her mother, and this combined with the fact that she saw her best friend get ran over at the age of 5 probably contributes to the fact that she was a very violent, strange, and troubled child. So for a few weeks before Mary's murders, she was acting extra violent. She was actually playing with a young 3-year-old boy, and he accidentally fell off of a air raid shelter, and he suffered really bad injuries, but his family of course thought it was an accident because Mary was only 10 at the time. Something else to note throughout this story is how Mary seems to always be alone, unsupervised, and just wandering about, doing as she pleases. This is because there was a lot of prostitutes living in this neighborhood with young children, and they would just let them run about until like midnight or the early hours of the morning. But anyways, 3 days after this incident, 3 more mothers came forward and said that Mary attempted to choke out their daughters, but the police kind of just shrugged it off. They only went to Mary's house to interview her and kind of tell her not to do that, and then let her go because, again, she's only 10 years old. A few weeks later, before her birthday, like literally the day before her birthday, she strangled and killed a 4-year-old boy named Martin Brown. This occurred in an abandoned house that I guess a lot of the kids in the area would play in, but a little while later she returned with her friend Norma Bell, who's pretty important in this case. They're not related at all. I think Bell was just a pretty popular surname at the time. But when her and Norma arrived to the scene, there was already 2 other boys there who stumbled upon the body. When the authorities got there, they noticed there was a bottle of pills next to the body, but they said there wasn't really any signs of foul play besides a few scratches on his face, which they thought could be from him playing, or maybe he fell or something. But they thought that this was a complete accident. They thought that Martin maybe thought the pills were candy and he found them, thinking they're candy, and then eats them, and then he died from an overdose. But little did they know that he actually died from strangulation. In the days after Martin's death, Mary Bell shows up to Martin's mom's house asking to see him, and Martin's mom kindly explains that he's passed away. Mary's like, "I know, but I want to see him in the coffin." So this really upsets Martin's mom. She slams the door in Mary's face, and it's pretty sad. A few weeks after this, Mary and Norma, same Norma from earlier, they broke into a daycare, kind of raided the place. They didn't steal anything, but they knocked stuff over, just kind of ruined everything. And then they also left some notes saying that they killed Martin Brown and that they were going to kill again. Police assumed this was a prank because of the notes. They were very poorly written with really bad grammar, really bad handwriting, but that's because they were written by 11-year-olds. But the daycare ended up putting in a security system, alarm system, because they didn't want this to happen again, and if it did, they wanted to know who was doing it. So a few days later, the security system catches Norma and Mary back at the scene. When police arrive, they didn't do anything because, again, these are little girls. They just assumed they were just outside, hanging out. So they told them to go home, and that was that. At school, Mary would brag, saying that she killed Martin Brown, but no one believed her because she was known as a show-off and a liar, and she'd often make stuff up to kind of make people like her, I guess. But then 2 weeks later, on July 31st, another little boy was found dead. This boy was named Brian Howe. He was only 3 years old. This time, the body was strangled. That was the cause of death, but it was also mutilated by a pair of scissors. I think he had a few stab wounds in his leg and scratches all over him. So when this body was found, the neighborhood's completely mortified because now that's 2 little boys dead in a matter of months, and the police are going around interviewing everyone, trying to find a suspect, but little did they know that it was another child. When the coroner's report came back, they started to catch on that it was another child because the lack of force used to strangle Brian was enough evidence for them to say, okay, this was a very weak person, so it's probably another kid. Also, Brian's body had a M scratched into his body, like on his torso, and obviously M for Mary. On the day of Brian's funeral, Mary was caught outside laughing and rubbing her hands together while looking at his body, which is extremely disturbing. So police decide to bring her in to question her, which was a very good idea. So Mary says that she saw a boy hit Brian in the head and he was carrying a pair of scissors on the day that Brian died. So she says she saw it happen. But police kind of know she's lying because the only people who know that there's scissors involved would be the murderer and the police. They hadn't put that out there yet. So upon further questioning, Mary and Norma completely break down and they end up confessing to what they'd done and they were charged. During the trial, the prosecutor claims that Mary's evil born and that she did all of this for pleasure. This is a little debatable because Mary could have been like this solely because of the fact that she had a terrible upbringing. Like, she might have not been born that way, or she was born that way and then just added on to that was her terrible upbringing, which drove her to killing. But in December, the jury did convict her of manslaughter, not murder, because a psychiatrist of the court said that Mary was a psychopath and she didn't really know, I guess, or have full responsibility for her actions. After this, Mary was imprisoned at a very, very, very low security jail. Like, they could just walk around and then kind of put themselves back in confinement at the end of the day, which is crazy. At the age of 20, so 8 years later, she actually escaped from this place. And people say that this was so she could lose her virginity. But anyway, she was captured afterwards and then she was put on lockdown for 23 days as a punishment. In 1980, she was actually let out, like, completely. She was put on very strict probation and also a protection order to kind of keep her identity on the low. 4 years later, she did have a daughter. This daughter had no idea about Mary's past until she turned 14. There was a tabloid paper that found their address and came over and I guess exposed the truth to Mary's daughter. And then she had a granddaughter, and they're all under court-ordered protection. So they have a secret address, and Mary's name is changed and all of that. Some people feel that she doesn't deserve this protection. June Richardson, who's actually the mother of Martin Brown, said this: "It's all about her and how she has to be protected. As victims, we're never given the same rights as killers." So that's really sad. I definitely see where she's coming from, but then again, Mary Bell was only 12 when this happened, which doesn't make it right by any means, but at that age, your mind is not even close to being fully developed. But yeah, Mary remains protected by the British government. And another interesting fact is that there was a book written about this whole thing, and Mary was offered 50,000 euros to give insights and kind of tell her side of the story. And yeah, she was paid 50,000 euros for pretty much murdering people, which is crazy. But yeah, that's going to be it for today's video. It was super interesting to research and I really enjoyed filming it. And I hope y'all liked watching it as well. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I hope you all have a good day. Bye.